Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be discussing Rage by Bob Woodward. This is Woodward's second, I think, of three books that he's done on the Trump presidency. And if you're not familiar with Bob Woodward, he's done a lot of books on presidents. He gets a lot of unbelievable access to them, asks them questions, and then does a lot of deep background discussion with people around the president and then tries to give us a view in. I've read all his books on the Bush presidencies. I think there were four of them. He had one on the Obama presidency. I think only one. But I've read most of his stuff, and while I don't agree with Woodward on many things, I appreciate the access he has, which gives us an insight into the characters he's discussing. More than any other Woodward book I've read, he felt very preachy in this. I felt like he was tutoring the president, trying to lecture the president. It was quite annoying at times, but he accomplishes what he set out to do, which is to give us an insight into how the president makes decisions, and I very much appreciated it. It only reaffirmed what I and many people have been observing for the last 10 years. Now, some story time here. I have not voted in a U.S. presidential election since 2012, and even then I didn't vote in the general election. I only voted in the primary. I was living in Kansas at the time, and in order to do that, I had to register as a Republican, which I wasn't registered with any of the major parties for most of my life. But in Kansas, it's a closed primary. So I had to register as a Republican in order to vote for Ron Paul, who you can see I'm wearing an InfoWars t-shirt with his picture on it. So he was at the voting location where I went to go vote. Coincidentally, I didn't know he was going to be there at that time. Really glad to see him. Got to meet him, talked to him very briefly. But I only voted for him in the primary. I went home. I unregistered as a Republican. And I haven't voted in a general election since that time. That's a discussion perhaps for another time. But just to give you some context of living outside of the United States, I have not been politically engaged. And as such, all the worries and obsessions of many other people have somewhat been exterior to me. That said, with President Trump assuming his second term, and by the time this video comes out, he will have been inaugurated. And so I wanted to give some context to who he is based on reviewing this book. Now, this book came out in 2020, right before that election. And while it talks about events of that period, I think it's still very relevant for who Trump is and how he acts. And the book starts with a quote. Well, this is a theme that Woodward will trace for us throughout the book. And he says, he's quoting Trump, "When you're running a country, it's full of surprises. There's dynamite behind every door." I was surprised at this dynamite behind every door language from Trump. Instead of being his usual upbeat, cheerleading, or angry self, the president sounded foreboding, even unconfident, with a touch of unexpected fatalism. So, in this particular case, I think he couldn't have known it when he started the book, but COVID was the dynamite for Trump's presidency. The way he handled it, the way that it played out, it's definitely sunk him for various reasons. I'm not going to get into the 2020 election. I really don't care. But I want to give you some quotes that sort of characterize who Trump is, how he acts from the people who are closest to him. And listen to this and ask yourself, is this not true? Is this not who this person is? This is from General Mattis, who is one of President Trump's nominees. "Reading, listening, debating, and having a process for weighing alternatives and determining policy were essential. I was often trying to impose reason over impulse, and you see where I wasn't able to because the tweets would get out there." And I just think about that again. Reading, listening, debating, and having a process for weighing alternatives. That is not how the president operates. He is a gut player. He doesn't read any books. He's not interested in reading anything. He just has his feelings, and then he imposes them, usually by tweet. And this is not a way to run a country. It's not even the way to run a business. It's not the way to run a family. It's not the way to run anything. You have discussions. You involve people. You can only make decisions like that if you're really right all the time. And Trump has proven over and over how wrong he is in so many ways. This is from Dan Coates, another one of Trump's nominees. "The greatest threat to the national security apparatus," Coates believed, "was that Trump wanted to ignore any kind of process that went through experts. people steeped in certain issues or certain parts of the world, often for their whole careers. In effect, and often literally, the president said, I don't need that to be done. I don't need these people. I don't need a National Security Council. I just need myself and perhaps 3 or 4 people I trust and work with. Trump didn't care for assessments or options. It was just whatever Trump wanted to do. Oh, Mr. President, Coates said more than once, it's a little more complicated than that. Again, if you are very talented and you know a lot about these different issues and you just have 3 or 4 trusted people with you and the decisions you make are good, who would blame you? But the thing is, Trump really doesn't know anything about so many things, and the people he surrounds himself with are just yes men, and so he makes wrong decisions all the time. And instead of, I am the first person to say that experts can sometimes be wrong, for sure. But that doesn't mean that you should disregard anything that they have to say at all. You should take what they have to say and weigh it with the people who are around you. Good leaders, great leaders, take counsel from the people around them. They don't just follow everything they say, but they don't dismiss them as irrelevant. I mean, listen to this. I don't need a National Security Council. I just need myself. This is, again, Trump's pride, his ego. These are also characteristics no great leaders have, this unbelievable pride and ego. Yes, coincidentally, some great leaders have had this great ego, but it's not something that you see consistently running through all great leaders. They have a sense of humility and understanding their place in the universe. Mattis later described for others what it was like to attend meetings with Trump. It is very difficult to have a discussion with the president. If an intel briefer was going to start a discussion with the president, they were only a couple sentences in, and it could go off on what I kind of irreverently call those Seattle freeway off-ramps to nowhere. Shoot off onto another subject. So it was not where you could take him to 30,000 feet. You could try, but then something that had been said on Fox News or something was more salient to him. So you just had to deal with it. He'd been voted in. And our job was not to take a political or partisan position. It was, how do you govern this country and try to keep this experiment alive for 1 more year? And Fauci, who I have absolutely no time for Anthony Fauci in numerous ways. He's a great villain who needs to be exposed. And I hope to review RFK's book on him in the future. But he does say something correct in this book. He says that Trump's attention span is almost -1. So if someone has an attention span of 1 minute, that Trump has even less than that, it seems. He just wants to say whatever's in his head. He doesn't really care about what you're talking about. He wants to move it on to what he's talking about, what he's thinking about, because that's really all that matters. It doesn't matter that what he's thinking about and what he's saying about doesn't have a lot of research, doesn't have a lot of thoughtfulness. It's just whatever's in his gut. And remember that sometimes a well-informed gut can be correct. And sometimes the president's instincts are correct. But if you don't work correctly for those instincts, you're going to get killed. And the perfect example of this, which Woodward goes back and forth with him over pages and pages actually on this, is the whole Ukraine-Biden investigation. So there was congressional funds destined for Ukraine, and Trump calls and says, I'm not going to release these funds until the Bidens are investigated. Now, we all know that the Bidens are dirty and compromised and thieving liars. We know that. And Trump knew that. But because he didn't understand the law, because he didn't understand the etiquette of things, he didn't realize you can't just hold back money because you want the Bidens investigated. What you want to do is show the proof to the people, win in the court of public opinion, and go about it by legal means. But you can't say, I'm going to hold back congressional monies and then do this. So once again, his instincts were right. The Bidens are corrupt, 100%. Everybody knows that. But not at the time. He had to make his case. And instead of making his case and going about this through ordinary means, he just decides he's going to hold back money, gets himself impeached as a result. And there's a classic example of, I can have the right instincts and I can act incorrectly and blow up everything. And that's what he did. Trump is his own worst enemy. And he loves people until he hates them. So if you saw him promoting General Mattis, and I do not like General Mattis for any number of reasons, but he really promoted Mattis. And then when he decided to get rid of Mattis, he just threw him under the bus. So here is the evolution of this. At 5:21 p.m., Trump tweeted, "General Jim Mattis will be retiring with distinction at the end of February. General Mattis was a great help to me in getting allies and other countries to pay their share of military obligations. I greatly thank Jim for his service." But 3 days later, Trump said that Mattis would be leaving early on January 1st. At a cabinet meeting the next day, Trump said, "What's he done for me? How has he done in Afghanistan? Not so good. I'm not happy with what he's done in Afghanistan, and I shouldn't be happy." Trump continued, "As you know, President Obama fired him, and essentially, so did I." Later, he called Mattis the world's most overrated general. That you promoted! When I asked Trump about Mattis a year later, the president said Mattis was just a PR guy. Can you imagine the irony? The PR president talking about Mattis being a PR guy? Mattis summarized, "When I was basically directed to do something that I thought went beyond stupid to felony stupid, strategically jeopardizing our place in the world and everything else, that's when I quit." And then in the footnotes, or sorry, the end notes, um, there's a reference to, I think, one of the tweets around this. Yeah, so this is a tweet from June the 3rd, 2020. "Probably the only thing Barack Obama and I have in common is that we both had the honor of firing Jim Mattis, the world's most overrated general. I asked for his letter of resignation and felt great about it. His nickname was Chaos, something that could definitely be used for Trump, which I didn't like, and changed to Mad Dog. And his primary strength was not military, but rather personal public relations. I gave him a new life, things to do, battles to win, but he seldom brought home the bacon. I didn't like his leadership style or much else about him, and many others agree. Glad he is gone." This is how Trump governs. He likes somebody until he hates them and then ostracizes them in public. These are not the actions, the instincts, the ways of thinking of a good leader. Trump is just not that. He has a great PR team, and he's had great PR almost his whole life. But if you go back and you scratch under the surface and you look and see, he went bankrupt in Atlantic City. He took credit for building the ice skating rink in New York when it was another firm that did it, who he refused to name and give any credit to. This is something else with Trump. Trump wants credit for everything. And this is another major problem. There's a quote attributed to Harry Truman, although it doesn't seem to be clear when and where Harry Truman said this. Even if Harry Truman didn't say it, I think the quote is relevant, which is, "It is amazing what can be accomplished if you do not care who gets the credit." The problem is Trump wants credit for everything good, and he wants to blame everyone else for anything bad. He never really wants to take accountability for something bad that he did. You'll never hear Trump say, "I made a bad decision." He'll always say it was someone else's fault, it was the media, it was fake news, whatever. He can't say, "I was dumb. I was dumb here." Here's again another quote from him. This is a tweet. "The intelligence people seem to be extremely passive and naive when it comes to the dangers of Iran. They are wrong," he added. "Perhaps intelligence should go back to school." What would Trump know? What does Trump know about Iran? Other than what the people he's handpicked around him have told him, who have not studied the issue, who don't speak Farsi, who've probably never been to Iran in their whole life, and yet they're going to advise the president on policy regarding Iran? You cannot run a country, run a business, run a family by dismissing everybody who has any experience, who knows more than you on the subject. It doesn't mean that they're right all the time, but it doesn't mean that it makes any sense for you to disregard what they have to say. Here's him characterizing himself. "Policy can change also, though, you know. I like flexibility. Some people say I change. I do. I like flexibility. Not somebody that has a policy and will go through a brick wall for that policy when you can change it very easily and not have to go through that wall." That's just another way of Trump saying, "I have no principles. And since I have no principles, I can change like the wind. I can be for something and then I can be against something because it's about the deal." He said recently when he was talking about deal, he was signing like a ceasefire or something along these lines. He says, "Well, you can change whatever you want to up until the deal's signed." Again, that strange, corrupt businessman mentality that I'm here to get one over on somebody else, not realizing that great deals make both people happy. They both feel like they win. Not like I won. And you see this. Look at his interviews. I've read both of his books that he had ghostwritten for him, Art of the Deal, and another book which name escapes me at the moment. But he he very much characterizes it as a zero-sum game. I win, someone else loses. But that's not how great deals go. You want both people to win because you might need to make another deal with them in the future. And so Trump has had this line of thinking be quote unquote successful for him for most of his life, and he thinks that that's going to continue to work in the presidency, and it hasn't for any number of reasons. So the PDB, if you're not familiar, the PDB is the Presidential Daily Briefing, and it is full of very important intelligence reports. It's so important that actually every president that's still alive gets a copy of the PDB. So President Obama, President Bush, up until then, President Carter, till he's passed away, you get a copy of the PDB because as a former president, you can give input to the existing. Now, the existing president may not want to hear from you, but as a former president who sees the PDB can then say, Mr. President, this reminds me of something else. You might want to go take a look at this. It's not long. The PDB, I think, can run anywhere from 1 page to 4 pages. Something that I appreciate about Trump is he wants to squeeze the PDB down to 1 page. He doesn't even read it, though. Trump did not read the PDB, but relied on oral presentations. He's too lazy to even read a 1-page document, Presidential Daily Briefing, on the most important security threats facing the U.S. government. It's too much for him to read 1 page. And this particular place was talking about the PDB in relation to coronavirus. So here is Jared Kushner. So Kushner talks to Woodward several times during this book. Keep in mind, this is his son-in-law. He's known Trump for years as a family member. So as he's trying to characterize Trump to the press, it's not as if this person, Kushner, is trying to do a hatchet job on his father-in-law. He's simply telling you how it is. But listen to what he says. Kushner's second recommendation for understanding Trump was, surprisingly, the Cheshire Cat in Alice in Wonderland. He paraphrased the cat. If you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. The Cheshire Cat strategy was one of endurance and persistence, not direction. Kushner was explicitly saying Alice in Wonderland was a guiding text for the Trump presidency. Did Kushner understand how negative this was? Was it possible the best roadmap for the administration was a novel about a young girl who falls through a rabbit hole, and Kushner was willing to acknowledge that Trump's presidency was on shaky, directionless ground? Then there's a quote from another book that Kushner recommended, which was written by a man named Chris Whipple. The book was The Gatekeepers, How the White House Chiefs of Staff Define Every Presidency. In a chapter on the Trump presidency added in March 2018, Whipple wrote that Trump clearly had no idea how to govern in his first year in office, yet was reluctant to follow the advice of his first 2 chiefs of staff, Reince Priebus and John Kelly. What seems clear as of this writing, and almost a year into his presidency, is that Trump will be Trump, no matter his chief of staff, Whipple concluded. A fourth text Kushner advised was necessary to understand Trump was Scott Adams' book, Win Bigly, Persuasion in a World Where Facts Don't Matter. That is back there on the all-time list. It's a great book. We'll talk about it sometime in the future, I hope. Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strip, explains in Win Bigly that Trump's misstatements of fact are not regrettable errors or ethical lapses, but part of a technique called intentional wrongness persuasion. Adams argues Trump can invent any reality for most voters on most issues, and all you will remember is that he provided his reasons, he didn't apologize, and his opponents called him a liar like they always do. So that's something else that Trump feeds on. The idea is, well, they're going to attack me no matter what, so it doesn't matter what I say. The facts don't matter because I'm going to get attacked no matter what, which is, again, is a very sloppy way of doing things. You're giving them less to attack you on if you lead with facts, if you lead with truth, if you lead with expertise, if you lead with knowledge, instead of just bluster in your opinions and whining all over and over and over and talking about how everything's great and how everything's awesome, and really it's not. Here's more from Kushner. Kushner had additional, and I really have no time for Jared Kushner. That's a separate conversation. He's a very evil person. But that doesn't mean that what he has to say here is not true. Kushner had additional explanations for Trump's fluctuations. The hardest thing that people have in understanding him is they see him as fixed, where he's not a solid, he's fluid in the sense that, and that's his strength. Once again, because he has no principles, he can be whatever he wants to be. Trump's background in business had taught him There's no deal until you sign on the line, right? You can make a deal and then you can go through with it, but until the paper is signed, it's not a deal. And that's how he is. And so he'll always be flexible. Of course, flexibility can be a strength in business and politics, but Trump's staff and cabinet rarely got a clear definition of direction or policy from the president until he decided or tweeted. Believing that every day the facts change is simply another version of Kellyanne Conway's 2017 statement that there are alternative facts. If you're enjoying this review, please consider liking, subscribing, sharing this video with people who you think might be interested. It's the way that you can help the channel grow, and it doesn't cost you anything. All right, let's continue. So I said that Trump is much more about photo ops and PR and appearances rather than any actual substance. And there's more here. I think North Korea was another example of that, where a lot of us, I'll be the first one to put my hand up, I was excited and hopeful that potentially Trump, with his crazy maverick ways, might be able to pull off a peace deal with North Korea and end this conflict and end the stationing of 30,000 U.S. troops in Korea as a tripwire for war there. But no, because he hasn't studied the issue, he's just there for the photo op. And he kept bragging over and over, and I'll read to you, he kept bragging over and over to Woodward about the photo op. But who cares about the photo op? I care about results. In a second tweet, Trump added, before taking office, people were assuming that we were going to war with North Korea. President Obama said that North Korea was our biggest and most dangerous problem. No longer. Sleep well tonight. He's taking credit for something that hasn't even happened yet, because that's what he loves to do. More than anything, President Trump loves to take credit for things. Using Twitter, Trump proposed the next meeting between the two leaders as spontaneous. While in Japan on June 29th for the G20 summit, Trump tweeted, if Chairman Kim of North Korea sees this, I would meet him at the border DMZ just to shake his hand and say hello. Again, a photo op. The event was an international media spectacle, but it achieved no immediate substantive diplomatic outcome. A ratings-minded president gets the shot he wanted. Read a headline in the next day's Washington Post. And that's exactly what he wanted. He wanted photos of it. He's had them blown up, displayed everywhere. Here he is talking about it to Woodward. This is me and him, Trump said. That's the line, right? Then I walked over the line. Pretty cool, you know? Pretty cool, right? That's the line between North and South Korea. That's the line. That's North and South Korea. That's the line. That line is a big deal. Nobody has ever stepped across that line, ever. Many others had crossed the border into North Korea, but Trump was the first sitting U.S. president to do so. Trump continued, I said, would you like me to come in? He said, yes, I would like you to come in. Nobody's ever done that. I mean, they're cool pictures when you talk about iconic pictures. How about that? That's all he cares about. He got his selfie with Kim in North Korea. He doesn't care about solving the problem because that would take studying, thinking, consulting with experts, and making decisions that involve other countries and other people. And that is too much work for Trump. That is way too much work. He'd rather be tweeting and talking about other things. Here's something else. When he's talking about the decision, I think, to end travel, put travel restrictions between the U.S. and China, and this might have been in February or March of 2020. On May the 6th, he told me, and let me tell you, I had a room of 20 to 21 people, and everyone in that room except me did not want to have that ban. The problem is Trump doesn't know that Woodward is talking to all these other people on background. So here Woodward says, at least 7 times, including a press briefing, a televised town hall, interviews on Fox News and ABC, and in meetings with industry executives and Republican lawmakers, he has repeated versions of this story. Even when he made what appears to have been a tough and sound decision, on the advice of his top national security and medical experts, he wanted and took all the credit for himself. But the reality is there were numerous other people in those meetings who told him that, yes, you should shut down. Here Trump characterizes as everyone else said no and I made the hard decision. Once again, he can't share the credit with anyone else. He can't say that my expert advisors told me to end travel with China during this time period, and I agreed with them. He has to have the idea because he needs all the credit, because he's a little child who's never gotten the affirmation he needed. And he still needs it to this day and hour. He needs to be told about how great he is all the time. Here's another example. Did somebody help you? This is Woodward. Yeah, I get people. They come up with ideas, but the ideas are mine, Bob. The ideas are mine. Want to know something? Everything's mine. You know, everything is mine. And for those of you who are thinking that Woodward made this up, all of these are taped. Everything that he has in the book, he recorded. So if you want the receipts, I think there's a separate book where Woodward was challenged about this. He says, well, I have the tapes of everything. I think he published the tapes as a book. But you can listen to Trump just ramble on in these tapes if you think any of this is made up. Unfortunately, it's all true. I think that's the worst part. He misunderstands signals from the public. So this is Brad Parscale, I think, who was his campaign advisor at one point. He said Trump's impeachment in the House of Representatives and Senate acquittal led to 1 million new donors. So this goes back to the idea that people are aware that the establishment are trying to take Trump down. And that is true to an extent. There is a swamp monster aspect to it. The problem is Trump also empowers the swamp monsters, employs swamp monsters. So sort of a false dialectic there. But in any case, then you have Trump, I think, saying, I could go shoot someone on Fifth Avenue and people would still vote for me. So there's a misunderstanding of the problem there. People have trust in the president, at least in President Trump, because they think he's going to do the right thing. Trump abuses that power, and instead of saying, I have the trust of these people, I should make sound decisions, he just says, I have approval, I have the mandate to do whatever I want, whenever I want it. That's how he understands situations like this. So when he says, I got 1 million new donors, he sold that mugshot picture of himself as a t-shirt sold out. He interprets that as, I have carte blanche to do whatever I want. And that's wrong. The people love him for various reasons. And in a sense, yes, it is for in their eyes to do whatever he wants. But that's ultimately self-defeating for the president, for America, for everyone. You don't want to give someone the impression that they can do whatever they want and they won't get into trouble. You need to give someone the impression that they have a big mandate from the people who elected him and from God who gives him his authority to do the right thing. And you will be judged in proportion to the responsibility that you have. And when you have the responsibility for a whole nation, when Trump goes to his judgment before God, God is going to judge him on what he did for America. And instead, he just treats it like this is sort of fun hobby that he doesn't take it seriously. And I think that's frustrating for any Americans who have to deal with it. As an American citizen, even if I'm living abroad, I still have to deal with that. Here are the final thoughts from Woodward. I thought back to the conversation with Trump on February the 7th when he mentioned the dynamite behind every door, the unexpected explosion that could change everything. He was apparently thinking about some external event that would affect the Trump presidency. But now I've come to the conclusion that the dynamite behind the door was in plain sight. It was Trump himself. The oversized personality, the failure to organize, the lack of discipline, the lack of trust in others he had picked, in experts, the undermining or the attempted undermining of so many American institutions, the failure to be a calming, healing voice, the unwillingness to acknowledge error, the failure to do his homework, to extend the olive branch, to listen carefully to others, to craft a plan. I couldn't agree with that more. That is really him in a nutshell. Trump is a living paradox, capable of being friendly and appealing. He can also be savage, and his treatment of people is often almost unbelievable. On almost every foreign policy issue, and for those of you who watch this channel, you know that foreign policy is something that is really important to me and something I take very seriously, but that relies researching, admitting when you don't know something, say, I don't know, I'm going to have to research that a bit more. Not just having an opinion or having a take, because that's the popular thing in our society today. Don't have a take if you don't know about it. If you care about it, research it. He has no curiosity to learn the issues on foreign policy. He thrives off of relationships, but this isn't the 4th century. Life is more complex now. You can't just have a good relationship with the ruler of some country and think that that solves everything. For me, his legacy is solidified in one sense by his remaking of the Supreme Court so that babies are no longer legally murdered at the federal level. So in that sense, and that isn't something that he just relied on what other people said. Here's a list of judges, pick these people, and he picked them, right? So I know he'd like to take credit for that. And in a certain sense, he will get credit because he did finally make the pick of those people. And if that's the only thing he ever accomplished, that would be enough to distinguish him as one of the greatest American presidents ever, because he ended a holocaust of murdered children, 60 million babies were murdered in America up and through the overturning of Roe versus Wade. However, the problem is he has every chance of canceling out that great achievement over the next 4 years. He's great at talking. He very rarely delivers because he doesn't understand that government is different from business, and he wasn't that great at business anyway. He's always good at appearances, getting the photo op, managing his image. That's He-R. That's who he is. It's about style, not about substance. And I get that that's a very gloomy outlook. And, I'm sorry about that. But look on the bright side. In 4 years, this will finally be over, and he can't run for president anymore. And wherever America moves on to, I don't know whether it will be better or worse, but it won't continue in the same chaotic manner. For example, releasing a meme coin a few days before your inauguration as president. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. In any case, if you enjoyed what I had to say, please consider hitting like, subscribe, as I said, halfway through the video. Share this with friends who you think might be interested. If you'd like to buy a copy of this book, that's one way you can support the channel. There's a link in the description below to buy it. Another way you can support the channel is by sending me a one-time donation via PayPal or buy me a coffee. There's links in there. If you'd like to support the channel on an ongoing basis, there's links to Patreon or YouTube membership there. You can get early access to videos like this one, chat with me behind the scenes, ask questions, find out more about my process. And if you'd like to nominate a book, either for 2025 or 2026, you can look at my Amazon wish list. There's all sorts of books in there. Pick one that you like, send it to me, and you can be the sponsor for that video. As always, until next time, enjoy your reading.